My name is Diane Foster. I'm 34, and I'm a certified public accountant, which means numbers don't lie to me even when people do. 5 weeks before my sister's wedding, my mother called to let me know my name had quietly vanished from the guest list. This came after I had already handed the bride a house worth $510,000. It's just for close family, my sister told me, laughing like she'd said something obvious. So on the afternoon her wedding string trio was tuning up, I sat in a small law office across town, signing a very different kind of page. What my parents discovered on the county property records before the cake was even sliced, none of them saw coming. Because the real shock was never that the house had changed hands. The shock was whose hands it landed in, and what that name meant to my father. If you've ever been the one who covers every bill and still gets left off the invitation, you'll recognize every page of this. Tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from, and stick around, because the ending still keeps me up some nights. To understand the house, you have to go back 18 years, to a kitchen table buried under unopened mail. I was 16. My father's hardware store had just folded, and the table looked like a paper avalanche. My dad stared at the pile like it might resolve itself. My mother refilled coffee nobody drank. I was the one who slit the envelopes, sorted the piles, and called the scariest number to ask a stranger to explain it slowly. That was the night I became the responsible one, and in families like mine, that title never expires, it just compounds interest. When my father needed to dig out of debt, the checks came from my after-school job, then my college job, then my real job. When my sister Claire needed tuition, I covered it. When my mother's car died in a parking lot, I bought the next one. Nobody ever demanded any of it outright. There's just a silence shaped exactly like you, and you learn to fill it. I kept every receipt, not to collect, but because accountants don't throw away records. 18 years of my family's financial life sat filed by year in a fireproof box in my closet. I told myself it was habit. A good accountant would have seen the pattern forming. I filed it under love instead. Then last September, Claire got engaged, and the pattern got itself a wedding date. Ethan Ashworth proposed at a restaurant with no prices on the menu. The Ashworths are a country club family, commercial property, charity galas, a lake house they call the cabin. Within a month, my mother had a new haircut, a careful new way of saying Ashworth, and a freshly rewritten family history. At the first joint dinner, I listened to her describe my father as an entrepreneur who'd stepped away from retail at exactly the right moment. The bankruptcy became a pivot. Our whole childhood got repainted in one evening. At some point, Ethan's mother, Diane, no relation, just an unfortunate coincidence, asked if my father had siblings. My mother smiled and said, "It's really just us. We're a small, tight-knit family." My father studied his plate. I knew exactly whose name they were stepping around, my father's older sister, absent from every holiday since I was 9. I said nothing. But hold on to that phrase. My mother uses it again later, and the second time, it costs her more than she can imagine. By October, the wedding had a date June 14th, and one problem nobody said out loud: Claire and Ethan couldn't afford to live anywhere near the Ashworths' world. My mother never asked me directly. She just sighed at exactly the right pitch. The Ashworths keep asking where the kids will settle. Here's what I actually had. I'd bought a rundown duplex at 24 and spent 6 years fixing it up on weekends. It sold that summer for a clean $285,000 after the loan. I had $145,000 in savings, built the slow way, and $80,000 from my grandmother Louise's estate. Add it up, $510,000, the exact price of a grey colonial on Birchwood Lane, 10 minutes from the Ashworths Club. I paid cash. I told myself it was a wedding gift. It mostly was, but I'll be honest now, in a way I couldn't be with myself that fall. It was also an application. 18 years of quiet checks had bought me proximity. I thought $500,000 might finally buy me an actual seat at the table. A good accountant should have flagged that feeling as a red flag on the ledger. I filed it under love instead. Pay attention here, because everything downstream runs through this detail. I bought the house in my own name. That wasn't a scheme, it's how a careful person structures a large gift. My attorney, Marcus Webb, drafted a transfer deed that would eventually move the house into Claire's name, with a staged key ceremony planned for the reception, photographer included. Fine. I don't need theater. I let her have it. Until that deed was signed, the house was legally, entirely mine, which suited everyone, since Claire's prenup was still being drafted, and no accountant transfers a $500,000 asset into a marriage before that paperwork is finished. So in March, Claire and Ethan moved into the Birchwood house early, my concession. The tax bill, the insurance, the utilities, all mine. Claire posted kitchen photos captioned "Home Sweet Home." I kept one brass key on my own keychain, because owners keep a key. Looking back, everyone had a key to that house except the truth. The truth was still waiting on a signature, and 2 people in my family were counting on that signature harder than they were counting on me. The engagement party handed me my first real receipt. Seated at the last table beside the espresso machine, I watched my father toast everyone who'd made the evening possible, the Ashworths. Good timing, everyone but me. Then Diane Ashworth touched my elbow near the coat check and said warmly, "You've done such a lovely job. Are you with the event planners?" She thought I was staff. My mother stood 3 feet away. She had 3 full seconds to say, "This is my daughter." Instead she said, "Oh, she's just helping out," and steered the conversation toward the cake table. Just helping out. Driving my parents home that night, my mother started talking quietly to her own reflection in the window about her own 1990 wedding, about my grandmother Louise walking the reception counting flower arrangements out loud so everyone could hear exactly what the bride's family hadn't spent. Then she snapped her purse shut, and the conversation ended. She wasn't apologizing for the last table. She was explaining, in the only language she had, why there would always be one. Wedding season turned my inbox into a cash register. The florist deposit landed in my email, not Claire's. Dress alterations, mine to cover, just this once, a phrase my family uses the way other households use hello. One Tuesday night, out of pure muscle memory, I opened the old spreadsheet beside my receipts box. I didn't total it yet, that matters later. I just scrolled through 6 figures of familiar entries and closed the laptop, my chest doing something I didn't have a spreadsheet column for. That Sunday, I tried turning it into a joke. Jokes are how the responsible one files a complaint. My mother didn't laugh. She slid an invoice across the table the way you'd pass the salt and said, "Family doesn't keep score, Diane." I looked at her. She held my gaze until I looked away first. Family doesn't keep score. I paid that invoice that night in the dark, and I remember thinking she was right, in a way I didn't yet have words for. Somebody at that table wasn't keeping score. Somebody else had never once stopped. The call came on a Tuesday night, 5 weeks before the wedding. My mother's voice wore its bright, managed tone. "Sweetheart, we've decided to keep the ceremony small. Intimate. Just the closest people." A pause with a shape to it. "So you understand, don't you? We've had to be strict about the list." I actually laughed, assuming she was building toward asking me to cover something else. "Mom, am I on the list?" Another pause. "We think it's best if you sit this one out. Nothing personal. It's simpler this way." The room went still. I heard a rustle, and then Claire was on speaker, bright as a bell. "Don't make it weird, Di. It's only for close family." She laughed, not cruelly, even. The way you laugh at something obviously, comfortably true. I don't remember what I said. I remember my mother, in that same call, reminding me the florist's final balance was due Friday. Then the line went dead, and I sat there with a brass key an arm's length away on my keychain, worth $510,000. It's only for close family. I turned that sentence over all night, and it never once lay flat. I gave it 3 days, then called my father. 40 years of sounding like agreement while committing to nothing. "Your mother handles the details, honey." I asked if he thought it was right. He said the yard at Birchwood was really coming along. That was my answer. So I did what I do professionally, I audited. The small, intimate ceremony had a florist, and that invoice, which came to my email, listed centerpieces for 18 tables of 10. 180 guests. My cousin Renee, whom Claire has seen maybe 4 times in a decade, called that weekend confused, asking what she should put on the registry, since she'd just gotten her invitation. 180 people made the closest family cut. The woman who bought the bride's house did not. This wasn't an oversight, and it wasn't about space. There was a real, load-bearing reason my name couldn't appear on that list, and nobody was willing to say it to my face. What happens in a family like mine after a call like that isn't an apology. It's crowd control. My mother phoned twice that week in her project manager voice, just to confirm I wasn't spiraling. It's not about you. Don't make it a thing. Everyone accepted the arrangement instantly, as if rehearsed. The family wallet would not be attending the family wedding, and the family wallet would please keep paying the vendors. Only Paula, who sits 8 feet from me at the firm, called it what it was. Over lunch I told her everything, flat, like a case study. She set down her fork. Diane, you bought the bride a house, and you're not invited to the wedding. Say that sentence out loud. I couldn't. 34 years old, and I had never once said a true sentence about my own family at full volume. That Friday, my mother called with a new tone, warm, almost soft. She wanted to come by Sunday, just us two. And I'll admit it, some 16-year-old girl inside me, still at that bankruptcy table, heard her mother's soft voice and thought, finally, she's coming to fix this. It wasn't me she came to fix. She arrived Sunday with banana bread my mother bakes for leverage, not love, complimented my counters, then set a manila folder down and opened it with 2 fingers, like a Metra D presenting a check. Inside sat the transfer deed, signature line flagged in cheerful yellow, a pen already uncapped across it. We think it's best to get this signed now, Sandra said, before the wedding, so nobody has to think about money on the day. I looked at the folder, then at her. Am I back on the guest list? A small, tired sigh, the one that means I was being difficult. Those are 2 separate things, Diane. There it was. Clean as a balance sheet. My presence and my money, 2 separate line items. One welcome. One not. I asked her why Renee and 180 strangers, and not me. For 1 second, the receptionist's smile cracked, and my actual mother looked through it. She told me the rest of her own wedding story, 1990, being counted, weighed, and found modest. I stood in that dress and learned exactly what I was worth to them. I will not let those people look at Claire the way they looked at me. For a moment I saw her clearly, a frightened young woman handed an invoice instead of a welcome. I felt sorry for her. I still didn't pick up the pen. She left the folder behind. A few days later, Diane Ashworth showed me the machine itself, entirely by accident, smiling the whole time. At the bridal shop settling the alterations balance, still paying. We'll get to that, she lit up at the sight of me. What your parents did for the kids, buying them that house. Frederick was so impressed. A family that can do something like that quietly is exactly the kind of family you want at your table. I stood there holding a receipt for a dress I'd never see walk down an aisle, doing the math in real time. What your parents did. Buying them that house. Quietly. I didn't correct her, not weakness, just arithmetic. Correcting her meant detonating my sister's wedding over 1 second-hand sentence, and I don't spend that kind of currency on a single data point. I smiled, wished her a lovely afternoon, and drove off with one question circling. If the Ashworths genuinely believed my parents had bought that house, who told them, and how long ago? A lie that specific isn't small talk. It's infrastructure. That night I verified every fact I was standing on. The county auditor's site, public as a park bench. Owner of record, Diane Foster. The transfer deed, still unsigned, still flagged yellow. The tax bill, the insurance, the utilities, all mine. Marcus confirmed it the next morning. A gift of real estate doesn't legally exist until the deed is signed and delivered. You haven't signed. There is no gift. There's just your house, with your sister living in it. My house, with my sister living in it, for a wedding I hadn't been invited to, thrown by people who'd told their in-laws they'd bought it themselves. It wasn't rage yet. It was the feeling I get at work when a client's books finally confess. Every accountant knows what an unbalanced ledger wants closed. For the first time in 18 years, I understood I was the one holding the pen. That Friday night I pulled the fireproof box from my closet and finally totaled the spreadsheet, every tab, every year. 62,000 for my father's debts. 36,000 for Claire's degree. $9,000 for my mother's car. $7,000 in wedding vendors, for a wedding I'd watched through other people's photographs. $12,000 in everything else. The bottom cell read $126,000, and that didn't include the house. I took the brass key off my keychain and set it beside the folder with the unsigned deed. Everything they'd wanted from me, and the one thing I hadn't yet given. I didn't plan anything that night. I just let the two columns finally face each other, 18 years of paid, against one column of received containing nothing but a laugh through a speakerphone and a seat by an espresso machine. The books don't lie once you total them. That's the entire reason people refuse to. I left the key on the table instead of pocketing it. It was the only thing my family had ever given back, and it turned out to be the only thing I needed. Barely sleeping that weekend, I organized. In the folder from my grandmother's funeral paperwork, I found a business card I'd forgotten keeping. Vivian Cole, Commercial Cleaning Services. My father's older sister. I'd met her exactly once, at the funeral, standing alone in the back row while nobody in my family crossed the room. She'd looked at me and said, "You're the one who handles things, aren't you?" Not a question. Then she pressed the card into my hand, "Call me when the bill comes due," and walked into the rain. The family's official version of Vivian was 2 sentences long. "She's selfish, she abandoned this family." No dates, no details. Standing in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, I realized no evidence, either. Monday, I called her. Vivian picked a diner off Route 9, ordered black coffee and a slice of pie she never touched, and studied me before saying anything that mattered. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt once, which in my family qualifies as a paranormal event. When she finally spoke, she gave me the missing chapter, plainly, no self-pity anywhere in it. 25 years ago, my father had asked her to pour her savings into keeping the failing store afloat. She'd looked at his books first. That detail nearly made me laugh. It runs in the blood. The numbers said the store couldn't be saved, so she said no, offering groceries and mortgage help instead, not a blank check into a hole. By Easter, she was the villain. "Your grandmother told me family means you don't count the cost." I told her, "Everybody counts. Some of us just do it on paper, and the rest do it out loud at weddings." They wrote her out of every holiday since. You know what I learned, kiddo? Love you have to pay for isn't love. It's just rent. She said it like reading a line off an invoice, no bitterness, all fact. Something in my chest went quiet for the first time in weeks. Then she asked the question that rearranged my life. "So what do you still actually own, Diane?" I hadn't answered it yet when my sister answered it for me. Wednesday morning, a text from Claire, breezy as a beach day. "Hey, Mom says the deed thing still isn't signed. Can you just leave the signed papers plus your key to my house in the mailbox before the 14th? Cleaner that way, no awkward scene at the wedding lol. It's only for close family, you get it?" A thumbs up emoji, preloaded, approving its own message. I read it maybe 10 times. Your key to my house, a house whose tax bill carried my name. No awkward scene, meaning no you. That sentence again, now typed with a smiley face, casual as a coupon. Claire wasn't being cruel. Cruelty requires you to see the other person. My sister genuinely couldn't imagine the mailbox she was directing me to belong to me, that the entire set she was living inside had been borrowed. That's what my parents built, a world where my money fell like weather. Warm, unexplained, from the sky. Nobody thanks the sky. I typed and deleted a lot of things a wiser woman wouldn't have typed at all. What I finally sent fit on a receipt. Understood. Claire hearted it. That was the last real conversation my sister and I had before her wedding day. Thursday, I asked Marcus to stress test everything, because I don't make $500,000 decisions on adrenaline. Could I sell the house? Yes, my name, my title, my decision. The unsigned deed carried no more legal weight than the banana bread. Could Claire claim I'd promised it? A judge might listen for maybe 5 minutes, he said, but the facts were plain. Claire had paid nothing, fixed nothing, improved nothing. She and Ethan were tenants at will. Any new owner would take the house subject to them, and clear it properly, written notice, 30 days, by the book. I could have kept the house and never signed, rented it back to them, held it over the family for a decade. That's the version where I win their game. I didn't want to win their game. I wanted out of the casino entirely. And I knew exactly one person on earth who understood what this family does to people who stop paying. That afternoon, I made a call. Before anything became permanent, though, I needed one last piece, and I got it in the driveway of my own house. Saturday, I drove to Birchwood to pull the insurance renewal from the mailbox. Owner's mail still comes to the owner, a detail nobody in my family had considered. Claire and Ethan were at the lake house for wedding week, so the property sat empty under its maple tree. Diane Ashworth pulled up next door and waved me over. She was radiant with wedding week energy, and I finally heard the entire architecture of the lie. Frederick had been so taken with my parents' generosity that he'd invited 2 business partners to the wedding, wanting them to meet the kind of family that buys the kids a house and never says a word about it. Then, warmly, "It's such a shame you'll still be overseas for the big day. Your mother told us all about the assignment, she's so proud of you." Overseas. There was an entire other version of me out there: international career, a proud mother whose absence was noble and whose money was invisible. My parents hadn't forgotten to invite me. They'd needed me gone. 180 guests could attend precisely because none of them knew the truth. I was the only person alive whose face at that wedding would contradict the story, a walking receipt for the exact sum their new life was built on. I drove straight to my parents' house. I didn't yell. I sat at their table and laid it out like a client meeting. I knew what the Ashworths believed, and who'd told them. I wasn't asking for an apology or a refund. I offered one honest exit, priced fairly, tell them the truth, however they wanted to phrase it, and I'd sign the deed and stay overseas as far as anyone needed to know. Claire could keep her day exactly as planned. My mother's response came gentle as a lullaby. "Family doesn't keep score, Diane." I told her the truth wasn't a score, it was a fact. Then she stopped being gentle. She collected my coffee cup mid-sip, the way she does when a conversation is over, and told me plainly that the Ashworths finally looked at this family with respect, and if I embarrassed them before the wedding, I shouldn't bother coming back after it either. "You've always been the strong one," she said, back turned. "Claire gives this family a future. You handle things. So handle yourself." I looked at my father. 40 years of sounding like agreement. "Listen to your mother, honey." I rinsed my own cup and walked out past the pot roast. On the drive home, I decided to close the books instead. Sunday night I called Vivian back with the answer to her question. "A house," I said. 18 Birchwood Lane. I paid $510,000 for it, and I'm selling it full price, nothing clever, done fast, clean, and quiet. I'm offering it to you first, because I think you and I might be the only 2 people alive who'd actually understand the rest of it. The silence stretched long enough that I checked if the call had dropped. Then Vivian Cole, 63 years old, the first person my family ever wrote off, said quietly, "Kiddo, I've spent 25 years being the name nobody says at the table. I'll buy the table. Sentiment is sentiment, money is money." I laughed for real, for the first time in a month. We talked numbers like 2 professionals, a rental sold, a credit line, cash close, done in under 2 weeks. Before we hung up, she asked one thing. "Pick the closing date, Diane. Pick it on purpose." On June 3rd, I signed a purchase agreement selling Birchwood Lane to Vivian Cole for $510,000. Closing set for 11 in the morning, June 14th. Yes. That June 14th. I want to be straight about why. Because it wasn't theater. A wedding consumes a family's entire attention for a week on either side. Nobody would be checking county records, when the whole point of my family's pressure had always been that there would forever be an after, with my signature waiting patiently inside it. People assume revenge is loud. In my profession, revenge is a date on a contract. My hand stayed perfectly steady through 11 signatures. Pen up, and the old life had one more exit. Pen down, and you don't just lose face, you lose in court. I wasn't building myself a door. I was bricking one up. I did make one request. Vivian had to agree in writing that whoever was living in the house would get proper written notice and a full 30 days, everything by the book. She signed without blinking. "I clean offices, kiddo. I don't make messes." 11 days stood between me and the 14th. The inspection nearly gave it away. Birchwood is the kind of street where neighbors photosynthesize other people's business. Claire texted, confused, about clipboards at the house. I wrote back the truest thing I've ever texted anyone. The owner had the gutters checked before summer storms. Every word factual. Claire replied, Mom said she's handling the house stuff anyway, whatever. There it was again, any strangeness resolved automatically to Mom's handling it, because in their world the house had only ever fallen from the sky. The night before the wedding, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine I never drank, the brass key catching the streetlight. Tomorrow, one way or another, it stopped being mine. At 8:40 the morning of June 14th, my mother called, her voice suddenly, actually soft. Diane, sweetheart. The Ashworths keep asking about you. There's a seat for you today. Front row, with family, where you belong. Wear the blue dress. Then, itemizing it, and Monday, we'll all sit down and get the paperwork signed, and this whole silly season will be behind us. The seat had a price tag, and the price tag had my signature on it. She'd found the one lever she'd never tried, giving me exactly what I wanted. It might have worked, back in March. I stood in my kitchen in the blue dress, 2 hours to choose between the seat I'd always wanted and the person I'd just become. At the title office, a beige building next to a mattress store, I asked for 1 minute before signing. I thought about the seat, front row, my mother's hand on my arm, one phone call away. Everything I'd been buying on installment since I was 16. Then I thought about what the seat was actually made of. It existed only as long as the story held. Monday, the signature would come due, and after it, the next invoice, because there is always a next. My mother had said it best. Family doesn't keep score. She was right. A score implies both sides can win. What we had was rent, and rent doesn't end. It renews. I'm ready, I said. At the deed itself, I paused, felt the seat pull one last time, and signed Diane Foster in the same handwriting I'd used on 18 years of checks. The wire confirmed before noon, $510,000, coming back out like a long transaction finally clearing. Vivian shook my hand like a colleague. Nobody hugged. Then I sat in my car in the blue dress I'd worn for myself, and cried for 4 minutes, for the 16-year-old who'd believed someday it would be her turn. It had come. It just arrived signed, not served. I wasn't at the reception, so I'll tell it the way it reached me, through my cousin Renee's texts, and a call from Ethan 2 days later. The ceremony went perfectly. Claire was luminous under an arch of roses I'd helped pay for, and no part of me is sorry about that. The collapse arrived on schedule, during the toasts. My father stood with the ribboned key box, my mother rising beside him, radiant, for the ceremony that was the entire point of the evening. Meanwhile, Frederick sat at the head table with his phone out, pulling up the county auditor's site mid-toast to show his business partners the comps. He typed in the address, and there it was, refreshed that afternoon. Sale recorded June 14th, grantee Vivian Cole. He frowned, turned the phone toward Diane, and Diane, sweet, literal Diane, said into a gap between my father's sentences, at a volume that carried across 9 tables, Frank, who's Vivian Cole? My father stood there holding a ribboned box for a house that had stopped belonging to our family at 11 that morning, hearing his own sister's name spoken aloud for the first time in 25 years, at the exact center of the audience he'd built the lie for. My mother's smile stayed fixed, like a wall holding while the building underneath it moves. Sandra mentioned a mix-up with the county website, and waved the band back on. Nobody danced for a while. Claire called me 9 times that night. My phone was off, sitting in a drawer beside a folder of signed documents and one brass key I no longer legally owned. The house wasn't gone. That was the part they couldn't survive. It had simply gone home. 2 conversations from that weekend actually matter. My father called Vivian just before midnight, asking how she could do this to the family. She was watering her tomatoes in the dark. You know how it works, Frankie. It's only for close family. Then she hung up and slept like a paid-off mortgage. The second was Ethan. Calm and careful, he asked real questions in order, like a man conducting his own audit for the first time. I answered with documents, not adjectives. He said, "They told us your parents bought it." I gave him the sentence I'd carried since the bridal shop. I know. That's why I wasn't invited. He apologized, the first, and to this day only, apology anyone in that family offered me. Monday evening, Vivian asked me to come by Birchwood. We sat on the porch with iced tea. She told me about the gutters, her plan to repaint the door deep green. Then I took the brass key off my keychain and held it out. Yours. I don't keep keys to other people's houses. She folded my fingers back over it instead. Keep it. No conditions. I want to tell you what actually broke open in me, because it wasn't sadness. For 18 years, everything that passed between me and the people I loved had paper behind it. This was the first object anyone in my family had ever placed in my hand for free. That's when I finally understood what I'd been doing since I was 16. I hadn't been buying love. Love was never for sale, that was the whole secret. I'd been paying rent on a seat near it, and the rent had always been me. First dinner's Sunday, Vivian said. Bring that coworker you like. I'll cook. The porch light clicked on by itself, and neither of us moved for a while. Here's the final accounting. Claire and Ethan came back from their honeymoon to a certified letter, 30 days notice, everything by the book, and moved into Ethan's condo downtown. My parents sent one letter through a lawyer, heavy on the word promised, and it died quietly a few weeks later. I never responded to the family group chat, which had reclassified me from invisible to villain overnight. Instead, I mailed each of them a copy of the spreadsheet. 18 years. Every entry dated $126,000. And at the bottom, the house. No note. No demand. Just the books. Nobody ever mentioned it. The silence itself was the reply, the most honest one my family ever sent me. You can argue with an angry woman. You cannot argue with a ledger. My mother's new story is that I was never really family, always cold, always transactional, always keeping score. I've let her have that one, because it's the first true thing she said about me in years. I kept the records nobody wanted kept. In my experience, that's usually what cold means. The Ashworths didn't formally cut my parents off. They did something quieter, and far more permanent. The invitations turned seasonal, then annual, then purely commemorative. Nobody has ever again asked the Foster family to buy anything, which is its own kind of headstone. Claire and I don't speak. Some Sundays that sits on my chest like a stone, and I let it sit, because grief is one account you can't prepay. As for me, Sunday dinners happen at Birchwood now, at a table Vivian bought at an estate sale because she liked that it had already survived one family. Renee comes when the drive works out. Paula brings wine and opinions. Last month I fixed a windowsill while Vivian held the ladder and critiqued my technique, and it took me until the drive home to notice what had been missing from the whole afternoon, the meter, the quiet, lifelong sound of it running. I'm still the one who handles things. I've stopped apologizing for it. The difference now is that when I hand somebody something, they say thank you, and the transaction is complete. Nothing carries forward. Nothing accrues. On Vivian's key hook by the green front door hangs a brass key that stopped being mine in June, and somehow, for the first time, actually is. My aunt told me once that love you have to pay for isn't love, it's just rent. I'm 34 years old. I own my own name again. And I don't pay rent anymore. That's my story. One unsigned deed, one brass key, and a seat I finally stopped paying for. If someone in your life treats love like an invoice, let this be your sign to close the books. Share this with the one person who always picks up the check, and tell me in the comments, would you have signed? Hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.